Hi, everybody. Very excited to be back teaching string again online. And I'm going to grab a string and get started. So, and I'm going to do a rehearsal for a performance that I'm going to be doing on Saturday in the Worldwide Virtual Storytelling Group Guild performance on Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. This Saturday, I'll be telling the story of the old woman of Trora. So I'm going to just do a rehearsal right now since I have the camera on and recording, and I don't have any viewers yet, so I'm very excited to have people participating, and we'll see what we can figure out. So, this is a story that needs a little musical introduction. And I would normally use my auto harp, but I didn't bring it up and set it up this time. So, for the purpose of this recording, I'm going to start with a little juice harp. When Tsar ruled over the kingdom of Trora, he called his builders to him one day and said, "Build me a palace that will last for 1,000 years." And so the builders set to work, and they felled huge trees and cut massive beams to support a wonderful, beautiful castle for the king of Trora. And after many years, the work was finished, and the palace was beautiful and had a mighty look to it. But then a fire came and raged through the land, and the castle was destroyed completely, down to the ground. Nothing was left but a few burning embers. After much thought and some years of reflection, Tsar called his builders again and commanded them, "Build me a palace that will last for 1,000 years." And so the builders set to work. And this time they gathered stones, great, huge boulders for the foundation, smaller stones that were carefully fit together to make the walls. And finally, after many years of labor, the stone castle was finished, and the king was greatly pleased. But then An earthquake came and shook the land, and the palace was no more than a pile of stones. Some years passed, and an old woman came to the courtyard of the king and asked leave to speak with him. And finally she was brought in to the king's chamber, and she said to him, "Sire, give me leave to build you a palace that will last for 1,000 years." And the king looked at her and could not quite imagine what she could mean, and said to her, "How will you build such a palace?" And the woman answered, "I will build it on that which rides on the wind and gives to everything its shape and character." And the king turned to his counselors and said, "Who is this woman who speaks in riddles?" And one of the counselors said, "Her name is Marin, and she was the daughter of Koar." Koar was known to have great power of words, and it is said that when she died, she passed this power on to her daughter Marin. So the king said to Marin, "You have my permission. Please build me the palace as you describe." And Marin sat in the courtyard and began to murmur softly as if to herself. But as the words flowed out of her mouth, slowly a fountain grew in the courtyard and bubbled up. And soon there was a lovely wishing well around the fountain. And she continued speaking softly, and the words that were round and firm became the walls of the castle, and other words that were sharp and clear became like crystal the windows of the palace. And when she was finished, it was indeed a large, beautiful, and spacious palace. And some years later, another fire came and raged through the land, but the flames could not touch the palace that Marin's words had built. And some years after that, the earth again shook, but the palace stood firm, for the words of Marin were well and truly joined. And the king said to Marin one day, "How will we know that this palace will last for 1,000 years?" And Marin said to the king, "It will last, sire, as long as anyone remembers the words." And so she taught the words to Sar, and he taught them to his children, and they taught them to their children. For all this happened a very long time ago. And some say that far off in the forests of Trora, the palace that aren't built still stands, and the fountain still bubbles in the courtyard. Well, that was very satisfying. I'm glad I had the chance to tell that story. And I'm thinking about other stories I want to recover. One of my favorite figures, and I believe this is an Eskimo figure, an Inuit figure. It's hard for me to get that word Eskimo out of my vocabulary because it's in all the books that I read, that I learned these stories from. But this is the mouth, the Inuit mouth. Another wonderful figure that I will have to look up exactly where the people live who first had this figure recorded, but it's called the well. You can see how the hole goes down to the bottom and there's an opening at the top. The rectangle at the top is how you access down into the well, and then there's another figure that follows it called the fence around the well. Another of my favorite figures is the Navajo figure, the mountain and lightning. Zap. That doesn't show up very well. Let's try the yellow. I think that shows up best on the black. So there's the mountain. How am I going to do this? This is not right. I have to figure out a better way to sit to show things on the black. And now the mountain and lightning.